Now we are headed into a segment of the show we call Dr. J Answers, specifically woke or not woke. This is an idea that Mark had. We've used this term woke around the office from time to time, as Mark mentioned. And really, we should first, Mark, before jumping into this list that you have for me, and I haven't seen this list, so I've got no idea, these list of movies. And most of them I probably haven't even seen, so we'll depend on Mark to help me out. There's a classical sense of woke, and there's a contemporary sense of woke. Words change over time, so there's a fine dance between like the formal meaning and how a meaning changes or evolves. Back in the 20th century and in the early and mid parts of the 20th century, this term woke or stay woke was a way of communicating to someone their recognition of racial injustices. So this was a way of communicating in a short, quippy manner about the injustices in society, and it would be encouraged for people to stay woke. That's what the term classically originally meant. Now, over the last 15 years or so, though, it has taken on a new meaning to refer to other social injustices, chiefly of the LGBTQ plus sort. It may refer to other things, social justice, those types of issues like white privilege and white guilt, whereas back in the 20th century, those concepts would not have been associated with wokeness or staying woke. While there would be social injustices pertaining to race relations, not to the extent that they are in today's society. Okay, so that's sort of the classical versus contemporary. As is common in the television arena, in theater, in film, you might get material that's woke. And what does that mean? When I say that term, Mark, what I mean is that the artwork seeks to present its political or ideological agenda more overtly than seems reasonable or warranted by a work of art. Now, I think Christians have done a terrible job in many so-called Christian films in presenting their views overtly and thereby making it bad art, bad entertainment. But on the other side, on the non-Christian side of things, you do also get woke films or woke Disney Plus material. And my concern is, especially with the 15th Doctor, you're getting a lot more wokeism integrated into the show and the plot. Mark, you've got a list of films. You wanted to
yes. And
pick my brain.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. When I hear woke, I think of it as when they're putting the political message way over the idea of just a story and storytelling and whatnot. Anyway, I have a list of certain movies. I did some Google searching of what people consider woke or not woke.
Okay.
And I know you haven't seen a lot of these, but I wanted to go through a few. The first one I came up with was a big thing last year, and I know you have not seen this, would be Barbie.
Okay, Barbie film. Yeah.
Yes, which I'm assuming you still have not seen.
Correct, I have not seen it.
I definitely see where people are saying this from. I'm sure you've read a lot into it. I think this is a good time to also mention that just because a movie might be quote-unquote woke does not mean it's a bad movie, because I personally think Barbie is a really good movie. It's funny, it's well acted. Ryan Gosling is phenomenally hilarious, but I can see where people come in with the whole, because they'll be like, oh, well, it's about how female empowerment is important over male empowerment and stuff like that. So
right.
I guess my question to you is, from what you've heard, because we know you're definitely someone who does like to judge a book by its cover, would you consider this movie woke?
So let me start off by thinking about your comment that just because a film is woke doesn't make it a bad film. With regard to, say, technical production or artistic production, yes, it can be of high quality, because that term good and bad, those can be so vague in describing a movie. The question for me is regarding the messaging. What is the message? What are the themes that the scriptwriter or the director wants you to take home with you? A film like Barbie, I would say, is woke. Now, it's woke in the sense of human identity, so it can be classed there because of this idea. And again, I haven't seen the film, but as you described, it's about female empowerment. I think also maybe in the workplace, is that...
It's been a while since I saw it, but yeah.
So there's like this internet reputation for a boss woman or a boss girl, basically someone who's owning it in the work field. A woman who does that does so at the expense of a family life. We could get into the Harrison Butker comments. I was interviewed on Tim Stratton's podcast about that. And the question is, what does a woman want in life? I would argue you can't have the best of both worlds. You can't be a total boss girl and also have kids. One of the two things we'll have to give. Yeah, I would categorize Barbie as a woke film. That's not to say whether it's a bad film or a good film on various other aspects, but on the messaging. So let me say this. Female empowerment in the workplace. Some women believe you should work as long as you can in your 20s and then get married and have kids. What we are witnessing in society today are all of the women who bought into that lie, who can no longer find spouses, mates, willing to marry and wed them and to have kids. There is a subset of society of women like that. And I think many of these women live with regret. That's what I'll say there. I think it's woke. We've got a list here to go through. So go ahead and dish the next one.
So going on, the next one's actually a group of them, and this has to do more with movies that would be considered woke and ones that I at least consider to not be that good. I just grouped a couple of the good old-fashioned Disney live-action remakes, which I'm not entirely sure if you've seen because I know you have kids. The three I have in here are Lightyear, which is one of them.
Okay.
That was about a year or two ago, which isn't a live-action remake, and the other two are, though, which was Aladdin and Dumbo.
Okay.
Both of which came out in 2019, which was a big year for Disney live-action remakes, and hopefully when they start realizing they're like, oh, maybe this isn't that great of an idea.
Yeah.
So, have you seen any of those three?
So I saw Lightyear. I have not seen Aladdin or Dumbo.
Okay, so obviously the main thing then for Lightyear is that it had that one character, one of Buzz's old friends, who happened to be a lesbian married to a woman, and they share a kiss. It was one of those instances where I think basically everyone online was like, oh my gosh, woke alert, whatever. Yeah. And that was the only moment. In Aladdin and Dumbo, both of which I thought were really not good movies. In Dumbo, they had a part where the guy's main kid, doesn't want to work in the circus and of course wants to be like a scientist or inventor or whatever, and this is taking place in like the 1910s, 1920s or whatever. So there's that. And more so in Aladdin, which was when Jasmine ends up not only getting together with Aladdin, but she ends up being the Sultan. So I'm like, wait a minute. I mean, I understand that, but I'm like, did we really need that? Because that didn't happen in the first one or in the original, and I don't think that was that big of a change. Now, obviously, there are some changes that Disney would like to make. For example, in Dumbo, I understand them not wanting to have the crows that they had because they're kind of racist. One of them is actually named Jim Crow. That's actually the name of one of the characters. So I understand getting rid of that. But having to make sure that Jasmine was the Sultan or Sultaness or whatever, I was like, that sounds a little bit too much.
Yeah,
so,
we certainly do.
Are those three woke?
I don't know that Dumbo would be considered woke. The Aladdin one, in that particular instance, I would say yes, because, it's just obvious that there's no improvement on the plot for that. Now, maybe certain people think it's an improvement on the plot to include that new detail, but I would not think that was an improvement. And rather, we can see that as an intentional change with a specific motive in mind. So when we can identify that motive, I think that's one of the indicators of how to identify when something's woke. With regard to Lightyear, same sort of thing here. We can recognize a motive for this side detail, and especially because it's an animated film. Everything is intentional when you're doing 3D animation or whatever you want to call it. Lightyear's definitely woke. They didn't have to include that little sub-plot line, but they chose to do so because they wanted to somehow depict a futuristic society where a lesbian couple, I think you said, and remind me, they had a child as well.
Yeah, they did.
Not to take people back to basic human biology, but it takes a man and a woman to produce a child. You otherwise have to play the role of God, and you have to take sperm from a man in order to implant the egg to create a new human, okay? So 2 women cannot produce offspring on their own. This is basic human biology, but we want to become like God. We want to do things that we believe God has created. So in this sense, yes, we can see that it is woke. Lightyear is a woke film. And I think that's why it also did poorly. I think others saw that as well. They recognized that ahead of time because the articles that came out. Disney Pixar lost out on a good subset of the American populace who would have otherwise gone to the theater to see it.
I'm sure that was part of it. I think there are other reasons. I mean, there's a lot of reasons. Movie theaters, we won't get into, aren't always doing that great right now.
What year did Lightyear come out?
It came out 2 years ago, 2022.
Yeah, so to me, that's...
I mean, also, it was just... And also for me personally, the reason why I wasn't the biggest fan of it was because it starts off by them saying, this is the movie that Andy saw in Toy Story. So this is the Buzz Lightyear based off of the toy and not the one that we know. I'm like, okay, but then that means that's in the past. So we're supposed to realize this is something he watched in like 1995 or whatever it was. The next movie I have for you.
All right, and this will be the last one because then we've got to close up.
Oh, yes. I definitely have a lot more to go through, but this one I wanted to go through because I wanted to just see. I saw this online and I never thought of this movie as being woke. And I know you've seen this because if you haven't seen this, then we're going to have a talk. Someone described this movie as it could possibly be woke if it came out today. And that movie is Jurassic Park.
Oh, interesting.
And this is why. You've seen it, right?
Yes, I have seen Jurassic Park,
okay.
yeah.
Just,
a couple
just
times.
making sure. There are a lot of movies I know you haven't seen. So in the original, there are two things that bring this up that I found interesting. One was in the car, there's a scene in the car where the Jeff Goldblum character says something along the lines of, God creates dinosaur, God destroys dinosaur, God creates man destroys God, and then man creates dinosaur. And then the Laura Dern character, Ellie, interrupts by going like, dinosaur eats man, and woman inherits the earth.
Yeah.
And then the other thing of interest, which I think some of the real, like, for lack of a better word, crazies out there would consider this woke. Don't forget, in that movie, all the dinosaurs are girls.
I mean, that's maybe a detail, I certainly missed. Now, the Laura Dern character making that comment, I don't think I would view that as woke. Rather, I would categorize that as typical male-female humor, right? Men are from Mars, women are from Venus.
There's another scene, too, with Laura Dern, I forgot, where she's talking with Dr. Hammond, and he's like, well, maybe I should go, because I'm and she's like, we can discuss how each sex survives differently in survival situations when we get back, or something like that.
Yeah. And maybe there are hints and hues of the Laura Dern characters as progressive in her time, perhaps, but not to the extent that we see today with wokeism. And let me give an example from Jurassic Park. Jeff Goldblum's character, I'm blanking on the character's name. He says something like, just because we can do something doesn't mean we should do something.
I love that line.
It's a great line. And we can apply that to our society today. Just because we can put testosterone in a perfectly healthy little girl, or we can put estrogen in a perfectly healthy human boy, doesn't mean we should. And just because human adults can have quote-unquote gender-affirming surgery doesn't mean we should. When perfectly good functions of the human body are removed because someone doesn't feel like they are born in the right body. This is where I would say Jeff Goldblum's character and how Jurassic Park, if it were made today, would not be woke, but rather that's a message to carry into our society today that just because we can do something doesn't mean we should. And I think a number of medical doctors in America have lost their mind on this. They've lost their moral compass, and they've lost their mind about the Hippocratic Oath, about doing no harm. And they are harming people when they do this sort of thing. I would make Jurassic Park not woke. That's my conclusion on that one. I think that puts us through four questions, 4 films. You've got a lot more.
You know what also the Jeff Goldblum character could say that towards is just because someone can say that a movie or TV show is woke while it's playing doesn't mean that they should say that a TV show or movie is woke while it's playing.
While it's playing, yeah, nice distinction. I'll work on that, Mark. I've enjoyed spending time watching Doctor Who and other shows here in the office with you, so thank you for your continued work here at Defenders Media, and I enjoy the camaraderie we have with each other. So thanks for coming on the program today to discuss woke or not woke and Doctor Who as well.